Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and many of you saw the very disappointing non-indictment, or at least it was disappointing to me. I don't know about you, but the officer that killed Eric Garner wasn't indicted, which means that the grand jury decided that there wasn't even any probable cause that a crime was committed, which has really upset a lot of people. I know that I'm baffled, and so I'm really searching for answers to try to understand this and get perspective. And one of the people that I love talking to is Dr. Chenelle Jones. Dr. Jones is a highly respected criminologist at Ohio Dominican University. A lot of people are really coming to her for important opinions, and she's my Michelle Alexander. She's right down the street from Michelle, and I just think that area is just a mecca for amazing black women just doing great things for the black community. So I want to ask Dr. Jones, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm a little upset though about this verdict though. Well, actually, I'm very upset about this verdict. Let me not even try to sugarcoat that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm dealing with that, wrestling with that. You know, we just came off of the non-indictment for Mike Brown, and then here we go again. But not only the non-indictment for Mike Brown, the same thing with John Crawford. There was no indictment with that case either. So it's three cases that we have here of non-indictment. So that shows that there's not even they don't even think enough, I want to say, of these African American men to even give them their day in court. And this is disheartening, is what it is, and it's troubling too. So that's how I'm feeling right now. And I think we need to have this dialogue here to discuss what exactly is going on. How did we get to this point? And really, what to do now? We really need to come up with some tangible and some good hardcore actions to do now to move forward, because we cannot continually lose our African American men and then no one is held accountable for it. This is a travesty in itself.
Well, it's so interesting because I just had a chance to talk to a young guy that I hadn't spoken to for years, and we had an interesting conversation. Are you able to hear me still?
Yeah,
Because
I
I
can
think
hear
I
you.
might have muted myself, muted you by accident. Sorry. Uh,
Okay. You just muted yourself now. I can hear you.
hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, now you can hear me and I can hear you. Okay,
Okay.
perfect. So, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I was hitting buttons by accident. But I just spoke to a young black man who's about 21 years old. You know, and I knew the kid when he was little, and I got a chance to see him again. And this kid is intelligent. He's well behaved. He's educated. He's law abiding kind of kid. He's not anybody's thug. And he told me about his neighborhood, and he said, when we see the cops, he said, I just run. And I said, well, why do you feel that way? Why do you just run? And he said, because the cops, they will threaten you and they will harass you and they will sometimes beat you up. And then they'll just make things up on the police report and say that you did these things because they know no one's going to believe you. And the thing is that this wasn't the first time I've heard this sort of thing. And it's interesting that we live in that society. Or we live in a society where there are people who love the police, that they see the boys in blue and they feel good, and the women in blue, and then there are people who fear the police. And my theory is that the reason that you have some people who fear the police and those who love the police is because the police are not there to serve and protect everyone. They might be here to protect the first group from the second group, if that makes any sense.
I see what you're saying.
Now, as a criminologist, I mean, what have you seen to kind of, I guess, corroborate some of what this young black man feels in terms of his fear of the police and why some of that's justified?
Well, a lot of people either they have personal experiences that lead to that fear and that distrust, or they have what we call vicarious experiences, meaning they know someone who has had a negative encounter or a negative contact with a police officer, and then that influences the other person's thoughts, feelings, and emotions about police. And so, we there are good officers out there, and one of the things I always like to put out there is my involvement with the Teen and Police Service Academy, where we work with cops. And, all cops are not like those guys. We have a really special, unique group of police officers who actually go down. They work with these kids in residential juvenile facilities, in different schools, alternative schools and whatnot. And they talk about some of these very things that you were talking about with kids not trusting, but they get to the point of why they don't trust police officers. And then they work to improve that. The problem is we don't have more of that occurring. So you have these segments of society, and a lot of them are from communities of color where they don't have that type of interaction because of the environments that they are, because they constantly have these negative encounters with the police officer. And the reality of the situation is, the young man that you were speaking with, a lot of other people have that same reality and those same experiences with the police officers. So we have to get to a point, and the police officers play a vital role in this, and getting to the point where the public is not afraid of the police. You should be able to contact the police and be guaranteed that the police officers are going to come and protect you, and that they're not going to just shoot first, ask questions later. Since we're talking about all these cases, I don't know if you saw the video with Tamir Rice, the young 12-year-old who was up in Cleveland, and it seems as though he was standing outside. Somebody called the cops. The cops just showed up and shot that little boy dead. No questions asked. It was that whole shoot first, ask questions later. And there needs to be a pause. I understand they want to control the threat, or eliminate the threat, but the problem is Black people are not threatening, and we need to get rid of that misconception in a lot of the minds of the police officers. And so unfortunately, again, going back to the young man that you spoke with, that is so unfortunate that is his reality. But the thing is, a lot of other people experience that too, and it should not be that way. We should be able to call on the police. We should be able to trust that when they do come out, they're going to help us and not inflict any type of hurt, harm, or danger onto any of us. And what's been happening, though, is that message is getting missed here, and it's moving further away. It's increasing this social distance between communities of color and the police officer, when you constantly hear these situations of young Black men, older Black men, any type of Black men being killed by a police officer, and then the officer, there's no indictment, or it's not going to trial, or even if there is and they do go to trial, they're more than likely to get off. And oftentimes this happens because police officers are backed by very strong unions that support them. And so this situation is very unfortunate, is very disheartening, and we got to get to the point where we're going to feel like, okay, when is enough going to be enough? And I don't even think at this point, President Obama had the meeting the other day. He said, I want 50,000 body cameras. The reality of the situation is, the entire situation with Eric Garner was video recorded. We heard the sound and everything. We had a clear picture of it. So I don't even think body cameras will fix or improve the situation, and I don't even know if we as a society will want to go to that, because here's the thing: if you put a body camera on a police officer, then the police officer is behaving appropriately simply because the camera is there. And we need to get police officers behaving appropriately and treating everyone humanely, because that's the right thing to do, not because they're constantly being watched. And so that's, I go back and forth with the whole issue of the body cameras. I'm open to hearing other, people's thoughts and opinions. I know there was the one police department who their complaints had significantly dropped, but I just don't want people acting because they're being recorded. They need to act and behave appropriately, because that's the right thing to do. So that's where I'm at with this whole policing and these non-indictments. This is getting out of hand. I mean, it's been out of hand, but when you constantly hear it over and over and over and over again, and I know several criminologists who've been out on the field and fighting, and even within our own group of Black race and crime scholars, everybody is kind of pulling their hair and trying to figure out, what can we do, how can we improve this situation, or what needs to be done, so we get the message across that the way policing, the direction that it's headed, is not headed in a good way, and we need to work towards improving community policing and building these the police community relationships. And one of the things that I always say is, part of that problem here is, when you look at policing in general, when you look at American policing specifically, it was birthed out of a system that included slave patrols. Their goal was to marginalize, subdue, control African slaves. And so whenever you build a system and that is the foundation, I don't even know how far you can get past the core, because that is what the original idea or the original purpose of policing was in the United States. And to give you an example, when I was a kid, we had a house, and we moved in. I had my own room, and I was very excited, but I didn't like the walls, right? So for some reason, I was like, I'm going to paint this room red. I don't even know why I chose red. I should have chose pink and green. But anyways, I was like, I'm going to paint this room red. So I went and got this paint, and I painted one shade over it, and of course you can still see some of the original paint peeking through. So I painted it again. You can still see some of the original paint peeking through. 2 or 3 coats of the paint. By this time, I think I done messed up my walls. You can still see specks of the original paint. And so, my point for that story is, no matter how much you try to improve, you try to add programs and, put on this facade of police community relations, at the core of police departments, of American policing, it is that slave patrol mentality. And we need at some point to get rid of that, or figure out how we can eliminate that. And I don't know, maybe we just need to go back and rethink that whole system to begin with. But they are being used. They were used at the time to control certain segments of the population. And still today, we see that, just under a different name. And so this is part of the problem, just with policing in general. And we really need to go back and look at, community policing models, the purpose of policing, and really restructure that entire system.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up a couple things you brought up that I really liked. First of all, the point about slave patrols I think is very important. I hope people will walk away and remember that. That all of this, everything that's happened in the criminal justice system has a history. You can't have a present without your past. Your past creates the present. And if you look at mass incarceration, for example, which is deeply linked to racial profiling, right? You're more likely to be incarcerated if you're profiled. You realize a lot of this is linked back to slavery. The perceptions that the American public have of black men is linked back to slavery. The perceptions that police have of black men as these animalistic threats. It all links back to slavery. I thought that was a great point. The other really important point I love the fact that you made, and I think that you and I kind of, I think, are a little bit unique in the sense that we consistently bring this up because we work with cops. My father was a cop. You interact with the police in your community as a race and crime scholar, and we know that not every cop, excuse me, wakes up with a death wish. We know that cops have they have concerns, they have fears, they have real criminals that they have to deal with, and so the job is not an easy job, and good officers deserve that respect. I don't tolerate people saying I hate all police. I'm not that guy, but what's interesting to me, and I'm seeing a little bit of this, and I think we should see, I hope we see more of this, is that you're seeing some of the good cops who are now gaining that courage to say, no, some of this stuff that's going on is not acceptable. With the Rams, the St. Louis Rams, when they did the protest, and the police, I guess the FOP in the area, came out and were like, kind of going at them and saying, well, this is not acceptable, blah blah blah. The black cops came out and said, no, actually, we support them because they work next to these guys. They see how the system works. They're operating from the inside, and that's why I think guys like those individuals are Ken Williams, the former cop who's done some amazing analysis of the Eric Garner case. That's where they're important in terms of helping to clean up what really is a very messy, dirty situation. Because one other unfortunate reality here is that even some of the bad cops, I honestly believe some of them don't really realize how bad they are. Because they've never been introduced to the idea of black humanity in the first place. I think they really maybe did grow up thinking black men were a certain way, and that if the law says that you are right, then you must be right, right? And because if you look at the way the system's built, it's very interesting how you really see this juxtaposition of the same phenomenon, just with different reflections. In one case with Eric Garner and Michael Brown, you saw that the officer killed this person. There were lots of witnesses. In Eric Garner's case, there was even video. Not only is there not only was there an acquittal. I mean, an acquittal is bad enough. There was not even a trial. There was the presumption of complete innocence that because this officer had the law on his side, he must have been right. He must have been good. He must have been ethical. He must have done everything, in a moral and ethical fashion. Okay, that's the assumption we make about the officer. Well, on the flip side, you have so many black men who went to prison for either things they did not do after being falsely accused, because they didn't get a trial. right? They took the plea bargain. You look at Brian Banks's case, who was accused of rape falsely. His attorney flat out told him, "You are a big black man. The jury is not going to believe you." So there is a presumption of guilt. So here you have these two forces that are constantly colliding: black men and white police officers, and black cops too. I mean, it's the same phenomenon here. And on one side you've got the presumption of complete innocence. The other side you've got the presumption of guilt. And what makes that a really scary situation is that in some cases the guy that's presumed to be guilty is actually the innocent one, and the one presumed to be innocent is corrupt. I mean, there are cities across America where police have historically operated like a gang. We will kill you and take your drugs. We will lock you up for XYZ and say that you attacked me when really I'm the one who was pounding your face with this baton. I mean, this has happened thousands of times. So one thing that's funny, and I'm going to shut up about it after I tell you this, it's interesting to me. People will say, let's say, Dr. Boyce, what do you think about this rise in police killings and this rise in police brutality that's occurred in recent years? I said, there's not, and I just tell them, like, there hasn't been an increase. It's been happening all along. It's just that before, the media wasn't telling you what was happening. You didn't have people filming the interaction as it occurred. Now you've got social media where someone can tell the story of an Eric Garner, and it can become so viral that mainstream media eventually has to pick it up. But if you go back, for example, even with I remember specifically the Gina 6 situation. I remember people telling me about that story 8 months before it hit mainstream media. And they were outraged about it. And eventually mainstream media caught up. So imagine if we lived in an era where there was no Twitter, was no Facebook. The public never would have known about the Gina 6. They probably never would have known about Trayvon Martin. There's a good chance they may never would have. They may have never known about Eric Garner. So the world's changing. So tell me, as you see these dynamics kind of occurring, and you yourself, it's interesting as a scholar. I know where your heart lies. I know you want to do the right thing, and you're so committed to helping your people. But there's also that contrast, right? You work with the police, some of whom may not be happy with what you're doing. You're at a predominantly white university. Some of whom, some members of which may not be excited about this great work that you're doing. How do you balance those things? I mean, how do you kind of negotiate that conversation?
Well, I negotiated, and it is a balancing. I mean, it really is a balancing act, and the goal here is to teach. I think education is the key, and helping both groups come together and understand the different perspective of each other. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that I did I've been doing several things at my university, but one of the things that I did was I did a teaching tolerance community forum, and I brought in police officers, judges, attorneys, and some community activists. It was a very nice panel. And the thing was, it was so interesting when we talked about the issue of, what do you do when you're stopped by a police? So we let the police officer answer that, and he's a sergeant with the police department. So he answered the question, and it surprised literally everybody in the office. So they said, "What do you do when you're stopped by a police officer?" And you know what? The officer, he was African American. He said, "Well, you know what? I get nervous when I'm stopped myself." So I can only imagine how someone who is not an officer feels. And when he said that, I mean, just walls were broken. And, it just, everybody was then able to relate and understand. Like, even if you're an African American police officer, you still face some of the same struggles that, we, not being police officers, face. And it just brought everything into perspective with some of these racialized issues that we're dealing with in the criminal justice system. And, and the other thing is, yesterday I had my students protesting around campus. They were marching, and doing their whole chant and everything. And so, I got a lot of side eyes, and, public safety, they kept calling me and, wanted to know the routes and everything. And so I had to, tell everybody, well, this is their right. They're upset about the no indictment with Mike Brown. I'm sure probably now they're going to plan another march. But I say, and they have, this is their right. So go ahead. And, whereas some people, I've seen a lot of people, they scatter campus. They started leaving earlier than, people typically do. But the ones who stayed, and or they send me little emails. They say, I'm glad that they're organizing. I'm glad that they're standing up for something, because people need to know that these situations, that they're not okay, and their voices need to be heard. And it's good to have your student, my students stand in solidarity with the people of Ferguson and everything. So it really is a balancing act, and sometimes I let my advocacy side get the best of me, and then I have to reel it back in. But all in all, helping these two different groups understand where each is coming from, and really my goal is to try to bridge them together as much as I can. So that's why I'm always doing programming and different types of forums and initiatives to bring police officers together with our community, and hopefully this dialogue will constantly get some better understanding. But that's just the things that I'm doing. Some other things that you know we really need to do is, as you said, and I think I wrote an article about this, is having really the police officers start to take initiative and stand up for what's right, and really hold their colleagues more accountable for some of the things that are going on. And so there are a lot more things that we can do. Those are just some of the things that I was doing, but it is really a balancing act to try to deal with both sides.
Well, you're doing a great job of providing that balance, and what I appreciate about you so much is the obvious, the fact that you are a scholar that brings your knowledge to your people, and I just think that's what we're supposed to do as scholars. We're not supposed to just keep it to ourselves. So thank you. And speaking of scholarship, I know you have a busy day. You told me you only had a few minutes to sit down, so I want to appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to sit and talk with me. Thank you.
Oh, you are very welcome. This is important, so you're very welcome.
All right, all right, all right, everybody. This is Dr. Chenelle Jones. She teaches at Ohio Dominican University. She is a really strong criminologist and a good person, and just the kind of scholar soldier that we need in our community. So I encourage you to look her up. She is, as I told you, she's my new Michelle Alexander, and I'm sticking to it because this girl's bad. And I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. I'm the other guy who's on the video. I'm just hanging out here. And so until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.